The topic of application security can be a daunting one because we have to protect ourselves against threats that we can't actually see, fathom, or really wrap our heads around. And so for the CTO, this could be a difficult topic to address because it could be very expensive and conflated to something like penetration testing. I want to talk about what security assessments look like and hopefully demystify what your next steps or your current steps could look like in your journey to secure and shield your organization against threats. As you're building your organization, you have assets that you're protecting. So customer data, transactions, whatever business logic or IP that you have. You then have touch points to that, your web server, your database servers, your mobile apps, your APIs, your learning models or whatever. And this is your technology that could be exposed to bad actors or attackers out there. So you could have various motives for attacking a system. Could be profit driven, money driven. It could be for the glory, could be geopolitical, it could be terrorism, it could be all kinds of things. And so it's tough to bring that conversation to a C-suite sometimes because it's discussing things that everyone might be too busy to discuss, and you also have to present potential phantom situations. So I want to break that down so that it's a little more concrete. So if you consider your technologies and your IP and you consider the big bad ugly world out there, you do whatever you can to secure your technology. You build a gorgeous firewall, you have VPNs, you have access control, you have strict privacy policies and data access policies. But no matter what you do, if a system is on the internet, it can be attacked. And so you can have someone pose as a user, exploit some vulnerabilities and wangle their way into your systems. You can have someone, like we all experienced before, denial of service attacks or brute force attacks against your system. There are just many ways for us to be exposed in this world, in this internet and connectivity world. And it's important for us to model those threats. Now, what we also know is that systems that we rely on can be attacked and take us down with them, as we've seen recently. So it's important for the CTO to be able to facilitate conversation around this. We need to understand why people are going to attack us, why would be susceptible to anybody's ill will for whatever motivations people want to do. And we call this threat modeling. So I'm going to walk you through a couple steps for us. It's far more elaborate than this, but I want to give you a quick overview of how to model the threats that potentially exist against your company. First thing we do is we list our key assets. So in this case, key assets could be customer data, whatever value, business logic, whatever value we're providing to the world, stored in our systems, know-how, trade secrets and knowledge, that those are our key assets. Then we look at our attack surfaces. These are any apps, connections, anything that's on the internet that connects us to a potential attacker. That is an attack surface. So we know web vulnerabilities, database vulnerabilities, you name it, anything you do to get yourself onto the internet and the ability for people to connect to you. Then you want to take stock of your security controls. You want to take a look at what methods and do you have in place to protect your systems. Call those security controls. Then we want to take a look at our attackers and we want to say what motivates them, who are they, and why would they want to be driven towards attacking either you or a service that you very much depend on. Once you have these questions answered and you have your threat model, we will then start looking at potential ways in which this attacker could bypass your security control to potentially attack a surface and then get into your assets. And as your team, you will discuss a couple paths in which this may happen. It's a really good idea to bring in some outside consultants as well, people that really are knowledgeable about this. And you start drawing the realistic paths from your attacker through your security control into your attacks, into your web services or whatever services you use, and into your assets, then the data that they can extract from your system. And then we want to use some sort of risk matrix to determine the severity of those risks. So just the sort of the standard risk assessment matrix, which is, paths in red, paths in yellow, and paths in green, from very likely and critical to highly unlikely and low impact. Then we have our threat model. This is a fantastic way to communicate to your company, to your people, what could potentially happen to our systems. Once we have our threat model, the question is, how do we make that our own? How do we bring that into the company so that it forms an integral part of every aspect of your business? Oftentimes there's a conversation around the cost and the effort that goes into threat modeling and baking security into our existing process. Many companies tend to start off and run hard and say we'll address security later, which just means that the vulnerability is really high in the beginning, and then when it gets really expensive, they start looking at ways to mitigate for that. I want to talk briefly about how we can integrate that from the get-go. During the requirements phase, this is usually when we will also do our threat modeling. Then, when we do our system architecture and design, this is where we will in depth decide how we're going to build and galvanize our architecture against potential threats. With implementation, auditing code, reviewing code. With testing, it's a great opportunity to perform vulnerability assessments. And with deployment, we have this challenge where access control can be sort of loose because the code pipeline or the deployment pipeline might be complex. And in order to debug issues, sometimes access prowess goes out the door and we open things up, and this is a very scary part for us. And then during maintenance, when we fix bugs, we want to perform reassessments and we want to constantly make sure that everything is still relevant. So this is a great way for you to bake this into your requirements phase, your design phase, your implementation, your testing, your deployment, and your maintenance from the get-go.